Okay, good evening, everyone. The mayor is out of town tonight, so you are stuck with me. My apologies right up front. We'll get through this. Of course, we're here to do the revenue budget meeting. We're going to call to order. This meeting has been called for the purpose of consideration of the 2019 operating budget. The meeting is for information and discussion purposes only. No action will be taken this evening as the revenue budget approval is scheduled for the regular meeting of Council on March 21st, 2019. So we'll get going. Are there any disclosures of conflict of interest? Okay, seeing none. I will ask that each department head come up to the podium in the order outlined on the agenda. Each department will provide a presentation. We'll go through the budget booklet page by page, and council will be provided the opportunity to ask questions of staff. So let's get going. We're going to start off with Human Resources, Laird Crooks, pages 87 and 88.
Thank you, Your Worship. What I'd like to start out with, excuse me, before I get into the Human Resources budget, is for Council's review, is a review of the corporate budget impacts that you're going to be seeing throughout the budget presentations. So to begin with respect to salaries and wages for both QP and admin, and that's the non-union group, the wages are set at 1.25% increase January 1st and a 0.5% increase July 1st. Since we have not finished negotiations with fire, their wages are being presented at last year's levels. The next one we have, which is one of the bigger increases, and this is to our health plan, our healthcare plan, and it's going up by over 15%. WSIB is going up by over 6%. Employment insurance, almost 5.5%. CPP, over 8%. OMERS, over 4%. And the employer health tax is almost a 6.5% increase. So as you can see, this is going to have some impact on all of our budgets. If we look at 2018, we came in just around $35,000 under budget. Probably the biggest impact with that had to do with our employee and labor relations. We were successful in resolving two issues that were slated for arbitration, and so we avoided those two arbitrations, which would be roughly about the amount we're looking at right there. If we look at 2018 versus 2019, we're looking at an ask for approximately $35,000 over. And the biggest impacts on that, number one is long service. And as was presented to council a few meetings back, about over $8,000 of that is related to the adding of the part-time employees to the long service recognition. Wages is another approximately $16,000. Health and safety is another $4,500. And a couple of things just to point out with health and safety in terms of impact is our AEDs, which have been maintained by EMS over the years, really at their cost, which is fair. We should be paying for the maintenance of those. So they are going to be providing the maintenance at essentially what will be a cost of replacement of the pads and the batteries on an ongoing basis. So really, they're not really charging us to do it, but they're maintaining it for us, and that's worked extremely well for us to have that level of expertise helping us out. And I'm going to be talking a little bit later about some of the initiatives coming up in health and safety, the MOL, we see an impact on that. But the other one I wanted to point out, which is probably going to be around $1,000, is our attempt to get control over the sharps that are discarded, especially in our facilities. All of our facilities now have sharps containers in the washrooms, and that's something that requires an ongoing maintenance. And what it is, my department or HR actually provides the actual sharps containers to be put up, and that's becoming more and more of an issue for us to get control of. So if I could move on to the additions to base. The first one, as I had mentioned, is with respect to health and safety. We are looking for and asking for on an ongoing basis that we have someone come in and help out in health and safety on a full-time basis for 4 months, and quite frankly, those 4 months would be our peak time is during the summer when we increase our staffing levels considerably. I talked about the initiatives, and I mentioned it more up here, is that, you know, we're looking at every year the Ministry of Labour, WSIB, seems to come out with more and more initiatives. This isn't just taking time from my department. The bigger impact is actually on our frontline supers. They're struggling to get their own work done, plus do everything that needs to be done. And the other thing that, quite frankly, we want to see is bringing someone in over those peak periods that can help out as well in terms of the observation and the auditing of safe practices that are being done by, quite frankly, a lot of newer employees, let's say that way, that do need more guidance. What we're looking at is a cost inclusive of about $15,000. The second addition to base, InfoHR, I probably should backtrack. InfoHR is the Human Resources Information Management System. Great Plains is the software packages that actually manages the payroll. And what happens right now is whenever we're making, as an example, a new hire, for that matter, even if we're looking at a promotion or someone changing jobs, we now have dual entry. We enter it in human resources, then payroll has to enter the exact same information as well. What we mentioned up here is because of the unionized positions, it's actually the city treasurer who enters all of that changed information for all of the non-union staff, which we don't really consider to be great value added. So what we're looking at is this would remove the responsibility of the city treasurer to have to do that menial work. We want to reduce redundancies, reduce the chance for human error. This program will also allow us, when I mentioned earlier about the increases and other changes, to automate a lot more of the processes that we now have to do manually. And so we would see that a great value added with that. And the cost of that is going to be approximately $20,000. That's the end of my presentation, if there are questions.
Any questions of council? Yeah. Councillor Schattenberg.
Yeah, through Councillor Jerry Ascioni to Larry Crooks. The summertime or the 4-month health and safety person, is that going to be a company that's going to be hired to kind of do this work, or is it going to be a person that's going to be hired?
Sorry, could you?
Would you be hiring a company, sorry, to do the work of in the summertime, the health and safety?
Through you, Your Worship, no, we are looking at hiring an individual. Our preferred target would be, there are a number of very, very good programs in health and safety and ergonomics where they are taking graduates from a degree or diploma program. They are enrolled in the health and safety program, and they are required to get co-op hours. But I want to differentiate between what we often see as co-op. These are very experienced, these are very well-educated people, have very good background. That would be our preference, would actually to physically have the body in here. Would there be times where we might go out to the equivalent of a contractor? Perhaps, but that's not the preference for doing this.
Any more questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Right. Thank you. So on page 87, is there any questions on any of the items? Okay, seeing none. Page 88, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to communications and special events. Unfortunately, Brad's unable to be here tonight, so Mr. Curry's offered to step in, and good luck to see how well you match the voice.
Thank you, Acting Mayor.
I should say, sorry, pages 95 to 98 for everyone.
Mr. Jansen is unable to attend this evening. He asked to pass along his apologies, so I've been called up from the bench, and I'm afraid you're stuck with the B team tonight. We'll start with the marketing administration section of the budget. What's on Woodstock magazine is in its 21st year of providing information to Woodstock and its residents and businesses. You can see it has stable advertising revenue over last year. Last year was the first year that we delivered the What's on Woodstock magazine by mail, by Canada Post, to every mailbox in the city. Now that came with an increased cost, and so in 2018 we mitigated that cost by combining 2 months into 1 month, so there was a summer double issue. So the What's on Woodstock magazine for 2019, we're again proposing no change in cost from last year. There are additional costs, however, we are planning to mitigate those costs by again reducing the number of issues in the year by 1. And so that has already happened. The January-February issue was a combined double issue. The only other material change in this section of the budget would be the new equipment line. We're showing an increase of $13,000, and this relates to the replacement of the portable branded City of Woodstock tents. We purchased these probably about 7 or 8 years ago. They've been quite prominent and popular, so you've seen them, I'm sure, at many of the city special events, as well as other non-city events in the community. That we frequently get requests from community groups who are having special events to borrow these from us. And so they've seen a lot of use over the years, and they're in need of replacement. I'll turn this next section over to Mr. Dunham.
Hello, I'm the website developer here at the City of Woodstock. As far as the website budget is concerned, things are fairly similar to last year. We have a budget line for maintenance and development. In that line, is we're asking for an additional $4,600. About half of that is the fees that we pay yearly for our licensing and hosting with our website vendor. And that is where the increase is found, because this year we will be bringing the Come to the Crossroads site into the City of Woodstock domain. That is the economic development site that they use to attract businesses to Woodstock. And previously it has been hosted separately from the city website. By bringing it in, there's a number of benefits in terms of having the information in one place, not having to direct people to different locations. And we're also adding a few new features. There's going to be an enhanced directory for businesses and the industrial contacts, and we also are going to have a better available lands module that will integrate with MLS. We're working with the real estate board so that all of the commercial and industrial listings will automatically be listed on that site. Right now, the economic development team has to keep those listings up to date and change the information and remove them once those lands are no longer available. So that is where that increase is seen. The balance of that budget line is something that every year we use towards enhancing the existing offerings on the website. This year we're looking to direct that towards Parks and Recreation. That's been identified as an area that we can do a better job of giving them a better presence on the website and helping to highlight our programs more effectively. So that is where the rest of that budget will be going. In addition to what's in this budget here, we're also working on a portion of the website for physician recruitment. That's covered under another budget line, but we're working with the physician recruiter to give a dedicated space to promote that element. If I go to the next slide, I have an addition to base budget, and that is a $25,000 ask to set up what we're calling a corporate intranet. It's not technically an intranet because it would be available externally, not just internally within our network. What this really is a portion of our corporate city website that would be password protected. So it would be something that we can control access to on an individual basis for different departments or counselors, so that when we have certain policies, procedures, documents, agendas that we want to have available, we can have those offered on the city website. There's a number of benefits in doing this on the city website, such as the fact that they will continue to be accessible just as our current website template is. It's easy to find because it's in the same place as that, and we can put really whatever features we want to put out, just like what we're giving to our public offering here. We can build out pages on a page-by-page basis to list whatever we need to provide to our employees. This is something that we can take further in the future if we'd like, or we can leave it at this. But this is the initial ask for 2019 to kind of get us started on that. And that is the text that goes along with what I just said. You want me to do questions now, or? Okay.
Okay, we're on to the special events section of the budget, which starts on page 95. We have a full roster of events planned for 2019, some of which are listed here. These are the planned events. As every year, there always seems to be a new special one-off event that pops up. 2018 was an absolutely amazingly successful year for the special events. I continue to be amazed at what a very small contingent of staff is able to pull off for special events in this city. I think it's remarkable. So for 2019, there are a few things of note. In winter lights, we are proposing to transfer the lighting program, which used to be in here, to the parks budget. So you'll see that in the parks and recreation budget. So the lighting program is that portion of the winter lights that involves the setup of the lights, the takedown of the lights, the repair, the storage of the lights, as well as the purchase of new lights for the city. What's left in the special event budget is simply the cost of the Light Up the Night, the Friday night event in Museum Square. So it's just the event portion of the lighting ceremony that's in this budget now. The one material change to Cowapalooza, 2018 was a peak Cowapalooza year. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that before. So we're proposing to step it down in 2019, reduce the entertainment budget, I believe, by $10,000. But what we're proposing is to transfer that $10,000 reduction to a reserve to provide additional funds for Cowapalooza 20, which will be in 2021. So building a bit of a war chest to bring a special entertainment to Cowapalooza 20 event that year. I don't know who Brad has lined up for Cowapalooza this year, so I can't answer that question. But I'm sure it will be wonderful as normal. The long service banquet is also in 2019. We've budgeted an increase in the cost of this due to the increase in the long service award recipients. In the marketing section, we have one addition to base budget that we'd like to highlight. It's the communication and special events assistant. In the 2018 budget, council approved funds for a contract position for this title. And this position provides in-house graphic design for the marketing and communications in both print and digital media. And over this past year, this particular individual in this position provided corporate resources to support the development of marketing, communications, materials for economic development, public works, museum, library, parks and recreation, transit, marketing, special events. And currently what's on the plate is the physician recruitment program, the development of the logo, the marketing, and all the branding that goes along with the physician recruitment program. So in the 2019 budget, we've recommended that this position be moved from contract to full-time so that it's a full-time corporate resource. And with that, Mr. Chairman, we will take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Creary. Any questions of council before we go page by page? Just anything general at all? Okay, so seeing none, let's start with page 95. Anything itemized on page 95? Okay, seeing none, page 96. On to page 97. And 98. Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. At this point, we'll talk about Parks and Recreation, Mr. Connors, and we'll start with pages 49 to 58.
Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, as part of this presentation, I'm going to review the highlights for 2018 and then go into to the 2019 budget, the base budget, and the additions to base budget. So the highlights, the first one we have, and I just put up 10. I could have put up a bunch more, but I thought we'll just leave it at 10. The first one is Cowan Park transitioned in June with no sports teams having any interruption in play. So there was a lot of work that went on behind the scenes to make sure that happened. And from a public perspective, I believe that there was no one that noticed that that building had changed hands. In addition to this, on October 22nd, a walking track pilot was enabled, and we were able to sell 512 walking track memberships and average about 100 walking track users per day. We did this because we were the staff showed a lot of flexibility, and we were able to second 2 staff members who kind of had to leave their full-time job to be able to do this, and they were able to stretch and do this, and there was a lot of backfill throughout the department in helping them, so that was a really a big bonus. The other highlight we have is the City of Woodstock and UTRCA reached an agreement, a long-term agreement for land usage around Piddock Reservoir. That was 7 years in the making. Third is the city was able to purchase land known as the Sliver and the Square in order to build more public trails and plant more trees, and that's 117 acres. Number 4, Burgess and Standard 2 property has been completed with tree planting, 2 wetlands, a hibernaculum, 4 acres of native tall grass and prairie grass were planted. What will happen in the spring is there will be trailhead maps put up, and we'll still use this property to plant more trees as available. Number 5, we put in Southside Soccer Field was renovated and improved. This was done at no cost to the city. This was never a capital project. Park staff, the people who deal with the turf, they wanted to flatten out the turf. They wanted to test how they can do soccer field improvements, knowing that they were probably going to be asked to do some in the future. So they took the time and were able to make that field a lot better. Ludington Park was opened and phase 1 was completed. Camp participation continues its steep increase. It was up 33% year over year. And they surveyed the campers and parents, and there was over an 80% response to the camp that they were either excellent or very good. So that bodes well for future camp. Shanna Larson Park, phase 3 was completed, the shade shelter. Aquatics hit another record high in enrollment. So they had 4,136 people take swimming lessons. And over the last 8 years, the Learn to Swim program in Woodstock has increased 69%. And the last highlight, even though it's not the last, this is the fourth year that the city no one has had to pay for a public skate in the city because of the sponsorship and getting those skates covered by businesses, which is a great thing. So, moving on, I'm just going to give you some of the park metrics because they've changed a bit and they'll continue to change for a little while. Right now, we have 865 acres of parks and parkettes that are being maintained. 4 acres of traffic islands, overpasses, and corridors. 14.5 kilometers of trails. 178 acres of wood lots and storm management ponds. So that totals 1,047 acres. The parks is also, as been mentioned, is taking on winter lights, indoor turf they'll be taking on or have been taking on, as well as the 50 acres of sport fields at the Cowan Park Sportsplex. Some of the recreation metrics. The community complex had foot traffic again over 500,000. Youth and adult rentals are slightly down. Youth rentals are down 8.8%, and adult rentals are down 4.7%. However, we've been looking at this through revenue, and there is still some more revenue we believe to come in on this. So it's not that low, but it will be a bit of a drop. Lessons have gone up significantly. Again, year over year, it's 24.6%. Pool rentals have gone up 6.6%. And public swims have even gone up 7.8%. Lions Pool year over year was down 1.7%, but that was looking at when we closed Southside Pool, so there was a lot of program got moved in. So that was actually a really good number given the year before we were only looking at one pool in the summer. So. Recreational programs. The summer camp program grew from over 200 people from last year as far as the registrations go. Again, that was 33%, and increased over $20,000 in revenue. As far as new recreation programs, we were able to roll out several, even though our recreational programmer, or one of our main ones, was seconded, but there was some programs rolled out. The most popular, I asked, give me the 5 most popular, and they were the Cupcake Course, Family Yoga, Little Sensors, our March Break and PD Day options, and a safe cycling level 1 program. Were all programs that got rolled out that were new. Fee assistance. We had the greatest use of this program as far as dollars was in 2018. This was one of the places where we did feel that the secondment hurt us. Usually at the end of the year, we have someone make phone calls to the people that haven't used all their money up to try to get another batch going so we could use the entirety of the money, and we weren't able to do that just because of time constraints. As far as sponsorships and grants, we had a very good year with sponsorships and grants. The total there is incorrect. Actually, the total is 591,124. So that was a good year. However, again, our advertising is lower than it has been in the past, and that also deals with the secondments. So moving on to this chart, which is the 2018 budget versus the 2018 actuals. This isn't obviously the final chart, but this is as close as we could get it. There actually, even today, that there was some changes, and I'll go over that. But it's approximate where we're at the end here. Just going through the high level of it, we're looking at a budget where we're probably going to be about $228,000 surplus for all the divisions combined. Some areas are over budget, some are under budget. Parks was under budget by about 200,000. The complex was over. It'll probably end up being over by about 100,000. And the camps were significantly under the budget this year, just because of the amount of campers that came. So I'll move on to the big changes in the base budget for Parks and Rec. That's inside your budget packages right now. The first is Cowan Park. We're adding an additional 6 months to operation for the base budget. The next piece would be the maintenance contract with the UTRCA. So that's in the Parks budget. Those are the two really big movers inside the Parks and Rec budget. The Aquatic Center, heat and electrical. It's still costing us more to heat the pool, so that is reflected. The Legend online program, the costs are going up on that program. This also is the costs for the culture department as well. Inside this piece, because we go across the city with it. And then playground, we have spring testing in that. And what that is it's starting to become a norm inside parks departments that you have to get an outside contractor to look at your parks to make sure that there's enough bounce or enough give underneath the playgrounds. And this has come about just due to the amount of lawsuits that public entities have been going through. So those are the big movers inside the base budget. And this is what the 2019 operating budget looks like. For Parks and Rec, the 2019 budget request is an increase of $613,832 from 2018, which represents a 12.29% increase. The biggest increase, again, you'll see in Parks, and you'll see at the Cowan Park Sportsplex, which is the significant movers on this base budget. Okay, now I'm going to move to the additions to base budget because there is quite a bit, and that is both in Parks and at Cowan. First, the Parks. In order to maintain standards, more staffing is required in Parks. The Parks Department does not grow in correspondence to each time that there's an additional acreage increase or each time there's an additional increase to a new standard or requirement. One of my responsibilities as the department head is to make sure that Parks efficiently runs and maintains the current operation standard that residents have come to expect. I'm asking for the increase in the Parks staffing complement this year, as I believe without it, standards will be negatively affected. And what the ask is for one full-time park supervisor, one full-time skilled laborer, and one 6-month temporary laborer. To give you an appreciation of the growth that has taken place in parks, the Parks Department, and the need for the request for the staffing level, I'll provide you with some statistics. I think that's the best way to do it. In the last 10 years, there's been a 66% increase in park expenditures, a 249% increase in park revenues. Capital projects have increased 59% in the last 4 years alone, with the dollar expenditures at 171%. Park acreage has more than doubled in the last 8 years, with further increases on the horizon, with new parks above Piddock and the Cedar Creek lands coming online. One of the additions to the base budget package inside parks here is a park supervisor. And probably could have asked for this a few years ago, but I wanted to make sure we were, asking when we had need and not requirement. One of the things that I do as part of my job is I sign the timesheets for the park supervisor. And I can tell you, I know the park supervisor currently does not submit all their overtime. However, even though that has happened, they've had over 37 and a half days of overtime last year. And that amount is just required as not only the size of the job has grown as far as acreage and number of parks, but also the requirement of oversight and planning has grown. In the last 8 years, the Parks Department has gone through a lot of modernization, with many parks and park supervisor jobs becoming more time consuming. And just briefly, I'll go through some of these items as a short summary. Legislative-wise, there's an AODA compliance that we didn't have before. Staff training and documentation, including contract management and building security, has increased. Planning site plans have gone from 10 in 2013 to 94 in 2018. Training has more than tripled for the students. Risk management documentation of playgrounds year-round. Snow removal has increased in this department. Sport field documentation, testing, and forestry. As far as the risk management, that has been a big increase. Again, winter lights, spray pads, and synthetic turf has all come online in the last few years under the Parks Department. The park supervisor right now has 49 employees under their direct supervision. So that's takes a lot of time as well. So that's the requests for additions to base budget for the Parks Department. For the other request is Cowan Park. In order to maintain Cowan Park, sorry, I'm on the wrong page. Currently, the base budget at Cowan Park Sportsplex takes the operating hours back to pre-October 29th, 2018. So in the base budget right now, if that was passed, basically the building hours will go back to Monday to Friday, 4:30 to 10:30, and some weekends when major bookings take place. So the base budget really allows Cowan Park Sportsplex to run like we run Civic Center, which is just when a major group is in there, that's when we open it. The current clerk position that was seconded would need to go back to Parks due to needing to handle sports field bookings for both soccer and all the ball fields, as well as all the park bookings and the forestry calls. The other seconded position is the Parks Supervisor of Programs, Grants, and Sponsorship. This position would require major alterations, as adding a 7,700 square foot facility to an already full workload would mean substantive reductions in rec programming offerings, grants, and sponsorship investigations. It would also mean cancellation of the walking track during the day, which has 900 memberships sold to date, and this is counting actually some of the 2019. Some of them are into their second 3-month memberships. It would also mean canceling a very active parent and taught activity time from 11 to 12, which has about 50 people approximately on the turf at one time. If the base budgets are approved, Cowan Park Sportsplex can operate with a more full-time progressive programming mandate. Building hours would be 8:45 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. Monday to Friday, and at least 9 a.m. to noon, and much later on the weekends if bookings support that. We would pursue programming the entirety of the space, and I'm confident that this facility in a very short time would be able to be used morning, noon, and night by seniors, adults, and a wide variety of youth programs. At present, the staff have looked at adding an additional 35 hours of programming in Cowan Park if the base budget was set, and that's already baked into the additions to base budget as well. So with that, that's the end of my presentation on.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Let's start off with, since there's so much here, we're going to go page by page for questions, if that's okay, everybody. So we're going to start with page 49 for Mr. Connors. Is there any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to page 50 and jump to 51. Seeing none, we'll go to 52 and 53. We'll do these as twos now. Councillor Schattenberg.
Yeah, through Councillor Jerry Accioni to Brian Connors. I see trees and parks was a budget for 2018 of $3,680, yet $14,500 was spent. Was there something significant that happened to make such a difference? And if so, why is it $3,800 for this year? Will there be an increase again in 2019 for anything planned? I was on trees and parks section.
Trees and parks.
Middle of page 53. Yeah, it would be 83160.
Yes. Your Worship, through to the councillor's question, right now there is, when you look at some of the part-time hours, we do have an e-time card system, and sometimes the part-time staff haven't put the time in correctly. So you're going to notice that in some cases our part-time hours are a little bit strange. We've worked out that hopefully next year we'll be able to capture them correctly, but right now that's been some of the issues with the part-time staffing hours. Where they put them in was incorrect.
Councillor Lauder.
Yes, I was looking at 0701 67102 ball and soccer league rental fees. They're down quite a bit. Are they not being used as much as planned?
Your Worship, through the councillor's question, actually our projections were off. The ball and soccer field revenues actually up year over year, but we were told that the soccer fields at Cowan Park were used all the time. They weren't booked all the time, so that the difference there is the difference between projecting that every field was used all the time to the actuality of it. So ball fields and soccer field usage year over year has gone up, but as far as what we were projecting was incorrect in 2018.
The next one is the Fanshawe, recovered from Fanshawe ground, and it's not showing that anything has come in. Is that just a journal entry that has to be done? Or?
Yeah.
And the same with the Good Beginnings?
Yeah. There's a couple that come right in at the end, and,
Okay.
and those two are.
Okay. Just one more time. One more. On expenditures under the parks overtime, is that again due to, it's quite an increase there on overtime, the second one down, 0701 83 110 0102.
Yes, I see that.
And is that mainly due to Cowan Park, and a lot of overtime for that?
Our treasurer, I think, has an answer for that, because I'm looking around.
You'll notice throughout the budget that some of the salaries are going to look kind of wonky. The 101s will be under. With our new electronic time card, anybody that charges, whether they're administrative or hourly people that charge any time to overtime, is reflected in the 102 accounts. And the same thing with sick and vacation. So those are why those numbers are looking odd. Thanks.
Any more questions for pages 52 and 53? Councillor Lauder.
Sorry. I have another one on the vandalism, 0701 83 110 0356. The vandalism cost. Is that just the amount that we pay, and then there's our portion, or deductible? And then, of course, it just seems such a sin that we're having all this vandalism, and I know it's not your fault. It's just a comment that that people would have all these things.
Yeah, Your Worship, through to the councillor's question, yeah, this is the saddest line in the parks budget, because it is paying for the cost of vandalism that takes place in the parks. It is up a little bit. The number of incidents, I believe, of vandalism has sort of stayed the same, but the cost has increased. There was one where there was some destruction of a playground and some damage to turf, which costs a lot of money to repair, and that really escalates that budget quite a bit.
Any more questions for pages 52 and 53? No? All right, we'll move along to 54 and 55. Councillor Lauder?
One question on the Pittock South Shore maintenance, and it went from 95,000 to 170. Do we have to pay them the 170?
Your Worship, through the councillor's question, yes, that is the agreement that was put into place. So this gives access to the north shore of the park. So it's we have to pay more because we're getting more.
Any other questions? Page 54 and 55. Okay. All right, seeing none, we'll move along to 56 and 57. Okay, seeing none, then we'll finish things off for this first section for Parks and Rec on page 58 and the totals. Okay, then we will move on to page 59. So arenas. Any questions? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go to page 60. And 61. Councillor Schattenberg?
Through Acting Mayor Accioni, guess going back one page to number 60, the Civic Center and sort of the charges and overall, overall look at the Civic Center. We know there's some significant updates that will be required to that facility in the next year or so. But my question is more to do with timing, and had some comments from different people involved with Wildcats hockey to see if it was at all possible to get the ice in the Civic Center arena earlier in the season. There'd be more significant cost to that. Would it ever mathematically make sense to do that?
Your Worship, through the councillor's question, we have an agreement with the Agricultural Society that they are able to book times at the Civic Center, and one is for their wood show. So we can't build ice until that wood show is over. So that's why when we're in the Civic Center, the dates as far as when we can make ice are limited.
Any more questions for 60 and 61? Councillor Lauder?
I was just wondering if you could tell me what the specialty camps are?
Your Worship, through the councillor's question, specialty camps are going to be a new type of camp that we're offering. So these camps will be a little more expensive than our normal camps that we've been offering in the past, but they'll come with some more expenses. So there's some cooking camps, and the feedback we got when we did the cooking camps at a kind of the regular base price was we need more, we need to spend more money on the ingredients, so that there does seem to be a need for parents that were willing to pay for more to get more out of their camp experience for their kids. So,
Councillor Talbot?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through to Brian. The revenue that is being projected, the substantial $75,000 increase, what would that's, is that what we turned down in business last year, or?
Your Worship, through the councillor's question, yes, I really had to have the rec programmer explain this to me as well, but they're being very aggressive on camps this year. The one piece that is very new is that they're planning to do camps not only out of the community complex, but also out of Cowan. So there's going to be more sports camps that will be running out of Cowan as well. So this revenue is paired with that. Now, if we don't make the revenue targets, the expenditures will come down as well. So we just won't hire as many camp counselors. But last year I had to have the camp numbers explained to me that we were going to make over $100,000 in camp, and I was a little skeptical, and it happened. So I'm giving the benefit of the doubt.
Any more questions for pages 60 and 61 while we're here? Okay, seeing none, we will go on to 62 before we touch on aquatics yet. No? Okay, page 63, aquatics. Any questions of Mr. Connors? Okay, seeing none, continue on to pages 64 and 65. Okay, seeing, oh, sorry, Councillor Schadenberg?
Yeah, through again to Brian Connors. I see the expenses last year for electricity were 57,000 for the Southside Aquatic Center, but you're projecting as high as 77,000 for 2019.
Your worship, through the councillor's question, yes. So last year, the electrical costs were 73.9, and we're anticipating that it's going to go to 77. So that's why we've asked for a $20,000 increase in this line.
Any questions there before we move on? And then we'll finish off with pages 66 and 67 from Mr. Connors. Okay. Well, I think that's good then. If nobody has any questions before we allow them to have a seat.
That there is, I would love to have a seat right away, but there is pages 71, which is the community complex. There's the museum in between, and then there's Cowan Park as well on 79. So it's a little spaced out.
Okay, thank you.
I know, I could have just.
Geez, I almost gave you a freebie.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Schadenberg.
Thanks again to Brian Connors. I know the Woodstock Gymnastics Club has operated in the community complex since it opened in 1996. I see that the revenue for this year was 16,000. I'm assuming that's based on a rent or a lease amount. No increase projected or asked for or suggested for 2019? Sounds like they're getting a pretty good deal.
Your worship, through the councillor's question, that is a contractual arrangement we have with the gymnastics club. It's actually increased a little bit over the last 2 years because we're taking on some of the operating for them as far as the lights and some small repair items, but that's just based on the contract.
Any other questions, Mr. Connors? How about it? You want to sit down now?
Sure.
Are we good?
No Cowan?
No Cowan? Or Cowan Park, I guess that's... Well, that was... Yeah, sorry, what page is that?
79.
79, everybody. Sorry. And that's it? Okay, well, almost there. Councillor Fraser?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Through to Mr. Connors, you're forecasting quite an increase in field rentals and hall rentals for Cowan Park over the actuals from last year.
Your worship, through the councillor's question, We've been looking at the schedule and as far as what usage the major user groups will put in, and that's the number we've come to as far as the major renters.
So it's not you're estimating the usage, increased usage, and it's not an increase in fees?
There is a 13% increase in fees on the users. As far as the walking track goes, there's a 13% increase on that. There was no fees for the turf field. That wasn't. We never had a synthetic turf field, but we basically use the synthetic turf fields around us, and we kind of put our fees right in the middle between London and Waterloos.
And just going the other side, I know you've reminded of this to us already, but the full-time wages will cover off one person there full-time, and then supplemented by how many part-time?
Your Worship, through the councillor's question, that is a percentage of one person's wage. This is just the base budget that we're looking at here, not the additions. So this would be just a percentage of the supervisor of rec programs, sponsorships, and grants. And then the rest of the wages that would come into play would be the part-time student wages for custodial would be the addition.
That's just for custodial?
Yeah.
Any other questions? What's that, 79 and 80 for Cowan Park? Councillor Fraser?
Sorry. And you're budgeting a significant increase for heat. I understand the hydro with the hydro rates, but you have quite an increase in heat.
Yeah. Your Worship, through the councillor's question, I believe that is an error. So that'll be corrected before we get to there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, and I think that was the last section for you.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And at this time, we will go to pages 1 to 12, Administrative Services. Ms. Campbell.
Your Worship and members of council, I'm going to be doing the Treasury and the Administrative Services portion of the budget. So the first slide is just basically an overview of where our revenues are generated from. The majority of revenues, 73%, is from taxation. That's consistent with previous years. Other major sources of revenue include recoverable from others, which incorporates the recoveries that we get from the county, as well as different user groups that we partner with, such as Fanshawe College and Good Beginnings. The other ones are fairly self-explanatory and haven't changed much from one year to the next. So in the Treasury Department itself, we budget the revenues that basically don't fit into any other departments, payments in lieu, penalty charges on taxes, and additional taxes. We also get some financing from reserves and reserve funds, and there's a few miscellaneous revenues in there as well. Additional taxes is a number that's It's a little bit difficult to predict over the years, just because of we're reliant on MPAC to provide our supplementary assessment roles. But they've been more consistent and more frequent in the last number of years, and we've been averaging over $1 million for the last 3 years in our supplementary taxation. Interest income we've increased this year just because of the change in the interest rate and the upturn in the economy, and there was a $400,000 transfer that we were historically bringing in from our Hydro Legacy Reserve Fund. We've left that out the last couple of years just to give the fund a chance to recover and maybe to increase. The Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund grant is under review at the moment by the provincial government. They've agreed to keep our level the same as or I guess slight decrease over 2018, but that one may be disappearing in the near future, so we don't rely on that. It's a very small number for us anyway. We also get revenue from the OLG from the slot machines, and we're allocated quarterly payments. In order to be able to budget properly, we set aside the money from the previous year and then we allocate it in the next year's budget. And it's based on a council policy that is allocated the way it's shown on the slide there. There's $350,000 each year that we have committed to the hospital. This is year 17 of a 20-year commitment, so that one will disappear in 2022. We also allocate 15% to our community grant programs. We bring in 30% to the revenue fund budget, and the balance is contributed to the capital program. Similarly, we have expenditures that don't really fit into anybody's department, so we put them into the Treasury Department. Examples of that are the boundary adjustment payments that we continue to incur as we enter into different annexation agreements with our neighboring municipalities. Those agreements now are all in perpetuity, so they're numbers that are not going to go away. Tax rebates is a program that we offer for charities and other similar organizations in order for them to, when they rent a property that gives them a lower tax rate, we give them 40% back if they're in a commercial entity to bring it down to closer to a residential rate. Community improvement programs, that's a number that keeps growing. We've had a good uptake on our program, and it's financed from our Downtown Redevelopment Reserve Fund. There's two portions of that in the budget. One is the actual grant for expenses that are incurred in any renovation that's undertaken. And then the second piece is a tax grant back program, so that in the first 5 years of the program, taxpayers who have taken advantage of it are able to get a grant back on the increased portion of their taxes as a result of the new assessment that's been generated. Tax adjustments, again, similar to supplementary taxes, it's a difficult one to determine what it's going to be year over year, just based on timing of assessment appeals. And that's the major contributor to that number. The vacancy rebate, we have realigned the program, and it, although not eliminated, it's being reduced. Anyone who's taken advantage of it in 5 years previous to 2018 will be ineligible going forward. So we should see a decline in that portion of the adjustments. But we are at the mercy of MPAC and the Assessment Review Board in terms of we get some multi-year assessment appeals that go on, and sometimes we'll get 3 or 4 or 5 years at a time. So we can take quite a hit just depending on what settles out in any given year. The reserve and reserve fund contributions remain pretty consistent from one year to the next. There was a few changes this year. We have a new contribution to reserve fund for the cannabis reserve fund, which is matching the grant that we have received in 2019 for implementation costs associated with recreational cannabis legalization. We've also changed the contribution to the salary reserve. As Laird had mentioned, all of our agreements settled out in 2018 except for fire, so we don't anticipate we'll need to set aside as much money in 2019. One change that we will propose is on page 4. There's a $400,000 contribution to the Parks and Open Space Reserve. We had increased that in 2018 in anticipation of requiring funds to operate Cowan Park. And we did indeed need some of that in the second half of last year, but as Cowan Park is now forming part of the budget that's before you, we can reduce that contribution back to its pre-2018 level of $200,000. And we will bring that motion forward when we come to council with the budget on March 21st. There's also at the back part of your budget that's before you, I think they're tabbed. There are listings of the reserve and reserve funds. This is not a final statement. We're still working towards finishing up 2018, but it should be a fairly accurate indication of where we sit with our reserves and reserve funding. And there's information included there of what the 2019 contributions to and from the reserves are expected to be. So in terms of the Administrative Service Department, we're sort of a support service for everybody, and in being that service, we end up issuing approximately 34,000 tax bills in the course of the year, and maybe another 650 supplementary tax bills. We do the payroll for about 475 employees every 2 weeks, send out almost 10,000 payments through accounts payable, most of which we're now doing by EFT, which is the automation improves the process. It doesn't really reduce the work. We're doing 900 accounts receivable invoices, and we maintain the database on the city's capital assets, which at the beginning of 2018, the net book value was 185 million. I don't know where it sits yet for the end of the year. Achievements in our department, we pretty well completed the rollout of the electronic time card system at the end of 2018. We're now working to improve the reporting and working on streamlining the general ledger account structure so that it works for everybody. The pay stubs the implementation of the pay stubs by email was done about mid-year last year. We're continuing to assist with the Legend software implementation, working on the processes and developing reports. And we've finalized our caseware implementation and produced the city financial statements and automated the financial information return last year. In terms of 2019, we're continuing to look at options for online payment, particularly parking tickets. That's the one that we get the most grief about. We would like to implement a tax bill e-send. We did start that process in 2018, but we ran into a few snags, so we're hopefully get that worked out this year. We'll be rolling out electronic cash receipting into our engineering office once the renovation is completed down there. And our asset management working committee is continuing to work on the requirements needed to be met in OREG 58817. First deadline is July 1st, 2019, when we have to have a policy to council, and we'll have a couple other deadlines of that coming up. And lastly, we'll be producing our 4 sets of smaller statements that we have to do annually with caseware as well by the end of the year. In terms of our debt situation, principal outstanding at the end of 2018 was just shy of $15,500,000. A little bit of the repayment will be mitigated through development charges for the police and waste that we collect. And as of last year, we will no longer be receiving anything towards Cowan Park Sportsplex debt. We're anticipating issuing $2.8 million worth of debt in 2019 to finance the second-story addition at engineering, various road projects, and the fire hall, which is nearing completion, Parkinson. If everything is issued as anticipated, then our debt at the end of the year will be just under $16,700,000. And that's just a graphic of the various departments or functions of the debt. Emergency services makes up approximately 38%, roads and public works about 40%, and recreation is about 17.5%. We use some of the slot machine reserve fund money to fund our grant programs. As Mr. Connors had indicated, there's $30,000 being allocated for fair in 2019, and the balance of just under $200,000 goes into the community grants program that's looked after by the clerk's department. The other buildings is a collection of buildings that the city owns that don't really necessarily associate with a department. We've added one this year as we've taken on the clubhouse from the former golf course over on Juliana Drive. We do, when possible, rent the buildings out. So the Woodstock Hydro building continues to be rented by Hydro One, and any net revenue from that rental we contribute to the reserve for municipal buildings. And within that department, there's also a transfer into revenue for municipal building reserve, and that's to finance various heating, roofing, and masonry repairs on different city buildings. We used to budget all individually in the capital budget, and this is a streamlined process. In terms of additions to our budget, we're hoping to add a software package that will improve the capital budgeting process for 2020 going forward. We do use software from the supplier now to keep track of our capital asset inventory, and the software will integrate both with that software and with our current financial software. Should be able to improve our reporting. Additional cost in 2019 will be approximately $21,000. And our final ask is for one staff person in order to handle the requirements of the asset management planning that needs to be done going forward based on this provincial regulation. The first step is the policy that got to be done by the 1st of July 2019, followed by 2 increasingly complex asset management plans, one due July 1st, 2021, and the second July 1st, 2023. There's various information required with regard to levels of service, replacement costs, and we also have to have it in place in order to, we believe, to obtain funding in the future from the different levels of government. We currently don't have the capacity in our existing staff to complete this project, and that's been compounded by the fact that our senior accountant is retiring shortly, and she has been our go-to in terms of everything asset related at the city. So between having to come up with more staff in order to, or more resources in order to complete the planning, as well as keeping up with what we're doing now at the city, we just don't think we have the ability to do it with the staff that we currently have. It is anticipated that this person will be a liaison between the Treasury and the Engineering Department, and will likely be housed at the Engineering Department if it is approved. And it will obviously have an ongoing impact on our budget. And that's everything I've got. If anyone has any questions.
Any general questions before we get into each page by page? Councillor Schadenberg?
Yeah, through Jerry, actually wanted to Mrs. Campbell, the last item that was up there, the asset management program, is that specifically just for sort of depreciation of buildings that currently the city of Woodstock owns and manages? That doesn't get into things like roads and bridges and infrastructure at all, does it?
Oh, your worship, through to Councillor Schadenberg, it's everything. It's all the city core assets, it's parks, it's they were wanting us to look at furniture, it's everything by 2023.
Okay, we'll move on to page by page. So we'll start with page 1. Okay, if nobody has one, I actually have one concerning the BIA. Account number 0200-610-03000. Yeah, special rates, BIA. I was just curious what that was.
That is the BIA levy. So within a certain area downtown that's designated by bylaw, commercial and industrial properties pay a special levy. That's the BIA levy, and that's what we raise from there. And that's what they use to finance their budget.
So unless I'm reading this wrong, there's nothing allotted for 2019?
Oh, the BIA budget typically doesn't get put in until they come to council.
Ah, okay. Thank you. If no questions for page 1, we'll move along to pages 2 and 3. Seeing none, move along to pages 4 and 5. Okay, everybody good? We'll move along. Pages 6 and 7, sorry. Seeing none, we'll move along. Page 8 and 9. Okay, pages 10 and 11. And we'll throw in page 12 as well now. If there is, I don't have any, but I'm just going to ask. If anybody has questions in the reserves, would you be able to answer those as well then, just while you're up there? I think I had any. So. Any other questions before Ms. Campbell has a seat?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you. So we will move along to pages 105 to 108. City Clerk, Ms. Humphries.
Okay. Thank you, Acting Mayor Attioni and members of council. Okay, that doesn't work. Try that again. Okay. So I always like to start my budget presentation with some stats from my department from the previous year. Just a discussion about what our 2018 budget covers and what keeps my group busy. So we continue here at City Hall to be a popular wedding destination. We performed 64 weddings here right in this room in 2018. Almost hit our record of 70 in 2016, but didn't quite make it there. We issued 326 marriage licenses, so we're seeing those numbers increase year over year. Again, 64 of those performed right here at City Hall. The not so fun side of the vital statistics that we administer is the death certificates. We issued 515 of those in 2018. As our population ages and our city grows, we will likely continue to see these numbers increase. We issued 94 lottery licenses in 2018. This number has increased significantly percentage-wise over the last few years. Now, I don't believe that this is because there's actually more lotteries going on in the city. I think it's actually a compliance piece. We have had some focus in the last 18 months to 2 years or so on compliance and advertising to let people know that this is a requirement by AGCO in the city, so I think we're seeing some higher levels of compliance here. Business licensing, pretty steady for 2018, 132 licenses. Dog tags, 1,780, so we're continuing to see some success with our online dog tag program. Minor variances, quite busy again in 2018 with 25, and that number tends to fluctuate year over year. Zone change notices, 17. So following council meetings, when we approve or don't approve zone changes, there's a number of requirements for my department to process the next day. So council addressed 17 of those last year. Liquor was popular in 2018 here in the city. We had 20 permits issued, which is more than 3 times as much as 2017. We had 7 Freedom of Information requests, 346 paratransit applications, so that continues to be a popular program in the city. 543 commissioners of oath, and we talked a little bit about this last year. We've seen this number more than double in recent years, and that's because Service Ontario is no longer providing Commissioner of Oath services. So unfortunately what's happening is citizens are having to go to Service Ontario to pick up their forms and get the information, come here to City Hall to have them signed, and then go back to Service Ontario to submit them. So we have been in talks with Service Ontario to encourage them to reintroduce that program. They've contracted that service out, so those staff members are no longer commissioners. It is quite time consuming at our counter. Myself, the deputy clerk, the treasurer, and the deputy treasurer are commissioner of oaths by nature of our office. But due to this significant increase, we have added 2 more staff members on main floor here at City Hall who can provide this service because there has been such a large increase. And just one last fun fact, we processed 51,318 pieces of mail here last year. So every day at 2 o'clock, one of my staff members heads to the mail machine in the back room, main floor, and we process every single piece of mail through the city through that machine. So keeps us busy. Now, I don't have a lot of specific comments about our 2018 budget or our 2019 budget for that matter. It is pretty status quo for my department. We are projecting coming in about $95,000 under budget, and that is mostly due to a decrease in our general insurance reserve and a fairly significant decrease in animal control, which I've talked about in previous years as well. We've seen some different shelters and programs open in the city, and over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, our animal control costs have decreased significantly. So you will see that reduction in our budget accordingly. But I certainly wouldn't be a clerk if I didn't stand here and at least mention the municipal and school board election budget that we ran in 2018. As I'm sure you can appreciate, it's a very big undertaking for my department, and as you all know, under the Municipal Elections Act, it is my responsibility as the clerk to administer the election. We were very pleased with the administration of the election. We made a number of changes for 2018, and we were very happy with how those changes worked out. But we're also happy to say that we ended up coming in under budget. So you may recall a report that Council received in December from the Treasurer about carryovers, and in that report we discussed the fact that we would actually move that surplus into the election reserve rather than putting it into the general surplus. Because although we are very happy with the administration of the election, of course we have all kinds of ideas for 2022 already on things that we want to change and things that we think we could do better. So for example, we'd like to add a 5th super polling location in 2022. Of course, that comes with expenses, staff, IT, computers, printers, tabulators, all those things. So we want to make sure that we're being responsible and contributing to that reserve accordingly to get us ready for 2022. Now, we do already contribute $25,000 every year to the reserve, so this almost $15,000 of surplus that we have will help get us to the point we need for the next election. And I do want to just take a quick moment to thank all of the city staff that were so helpful to us during the election. The IT department, for one, it is a very, very big undertaking for them as well. Elections are becoming significantly more dependent on technology, and it's a lot of work for them, and they really go above and beyond, so we wanted to thank them for all of their work. We also tried something different in 2018 where we put a call out to city staff and asked if there was any volunteers to have city staff members working at our polls. And some of the departments really stepped up to the plate and helped us out a lot. So we actually were able to have the managing deputy returning officer at all 4 of our polls, as well as one of our roving polls, as a city election staff worker. So that gave us the opportunity to provide some additional training, and just have that really, really solid, knowledgeable person in that role. And it was really an excellent step for us, and we're hoping that those people will be on board for 2022 as well. There was also more people that stepped up to the plate, so we even had some city staff as revisions clerks and things like that. So again, we're hoping that they'll be interested in 2022. And certainly last but not least, thank you to our clerks department. We, with the election, absorbed that work into our existing jobs. That means that a lot of things take a back seat, a lot of things are delayed, other projects don't get done. There's a lot of overtime that goes into it, mostly unpaid. There's a lot of sleepless nights. And although I'm not surprised, I'm still impressed by how much my team stepped up to the plate, and they went above and beyond. And I'm just thrilled of how much success we had. So thank you to them. And just one last note, pardon me, about the budget is that when we have an election, when we look at the 2018 compared to 2019, it skews the numbers a little bit because of that big election budget, and there's no contribution to the reserve in that year. So the actual increase for the clerk's department budget is actually 1.9% if you take the election completely out of it, rather than the 2.35 that you see there. So in total, it's still the 2.35, but good news story, it's really only 1.9. So thank you.
Clear as mud. Yeah. Any general questions before we get into page by page for the city clerk? Okay, seeing none, we'll start at page 105. Councillor Fraser?
Thank you, Your Acting Worship. Through Ms. Humphries. In general insurance, you're looking at an increase there. Is that just a cost of insurance carrier increases?
Yes, Acting Mayor Accioni through to Councillor Fraser. So we are looking at an increase here. This particular budget line is specifically for buildings and general liability. So our actual insurance program for the city in totality is up about 3.4% for the year, but the liability piece is up almost 6%. So that's why we're seeing an increase there. That seems to be fairly standard across municipalities. Climate change is causing a lot of additional risk for municipalities, flooding and tornadoes and things like that. So because this increase really is due to that general liability increase. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions on page 105? I guess I just have one quickly for the Committee of Adjustments. Just questioning the difference there of the 18,950. Why such an increase, or what would cause that?
As I mentioned when I talked about the stats, that is a number that fluctuates significantly year to year. So in 2017 and 2018, we saw about 25 applications, yet the previous years to that, it was 14. So it really all depends on, based on the development, how many are required. So when I budget for this line, I look at that trend year over year. So it's very difficult to nail that one down, to be honest.
Okay, no, thank you. Councillor Schattenberg.
Yeah, to Amy Humphries as well. When the Integrity Commissioner comes sort of on board, what department does that get paid through? Would that be yours, the clerk department?
Acting Mayor Accioni through to Councillor Schattenberg. So that will actually be under the Mayor and Council budget that will be presented on Thursday night.
That's a good question. Okay, seeing no more questions on page 105, we'll move along to 106 and 107. And we'll throw in page 108 as well. Any questions there at all? Okay. Any more questions of Ms. Humphries before she has a seat? Okay, seeing none, thank you. We will move along to our last item of this evening, and that would be page 92 and page 48 by our CAO, David Curry.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Accioni, members of council. You are 2 short pages away from completing the agenda tonight, and I haven't prepared anything formally for you for either of these pages, so I thought we could just talk briefly about each one. Page 92, the CAO department. The majority of the change here relates to simply the wages. And just as a general note for council, when you're looking and comparing wages in the 2018 budget to the 2019 budget, because 2018 was a collective agreement negotiation year, we didn't carry any salary increases in that 2018 budget. So what you're really looking at is the same number as you would find in the 2017 budget. It was just carried forward. Any salary increases for 2018 were carried into a reserve for salaries and wages because of the unknown of the collective agreement negotiations last year. So when you compare budget to budget, you're actually looking at a 2-year salary difference between them. And that's across all departments. And if there's any other questions, I'd be pleased to respond.
Any other questions of council? On page, that was 92, before we move along. Okay, seeing none, we'll go to page 48.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. The planning section of the budget is really a very small piece that picks up whatever fragments of planning issues that aren't carried in the county budget or in other budgets such as the city clerk's. The planning revenue that you'll find in this budget is the revenue that's received from zone change applications. The clerk's department receives the revenue for committee of adjustment applications, and site plan control applications are kept by the County of Oxford because they process those applications on our behalf. So this just represents the application fees for zone change applications in the city. The county bills us back for certain aspects of their costs of providing services for these planning applications. So that's the office supplies, subscriptions and memberships, advertising, and telephone. So we're defraying a portion of the planning department at Oxford County through this budget. There's 2 other line items here that we haven't spoken about: legal fees. This is essentially in the instance that there's it's no longer the Ontario Municipal Board, it's the LPAT, the tribunal, Land Use Planning Tribunal, that should there be an appeal of a planning application that's under the jurisdiction of City Council, this would be the source of funds to defend Council's decision at the LPAT tribunal hearing. Council set up a legal reserve a number of years ago, so we're proposing to finance this out of that legal reserve so it doesn't affect the levy, because we certainly don't know whether or not we need this. We don't have any appeals pending, but it's just in the circumstance where one does materialize that funds are available and it's financed out of reserve, so there's no impact on the tax levy for that. We do carry a small amount of money in here for application fees, and that's in the instance where the city needs to file a planning application for whether it's an industrial park or for whatever circumstance we may find ourselves in the year. If there's any questions, I'd be pleased to answer.
And anybody have any more questions tonight? Thank you, Mr. Curry. Okay. So, another budget meeting will be held on Thursday, February 28th, in order to review the remainder of the revenue budget. I do suspect that one's going to be a little longer, just as a heads up to everybody. Councillors are requested to forward their suggested amendments to Council, the CAO, and the City Clerk, and the Director of Administrative Services by March 15th, 2019. Amendments can, of course, be brought forward on Council floor on March 21st as well. Looking for a motion to adjourn? Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor Schattenberg. All those in favor? Thank you. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.